The late 90s to early 2000s was a big shift in media. A lot was happening during this time, I think we could all agree, and TV was experimenting with new services. Services that have been long forgotten turning into lost media. To the point where it almost feels like a dream of whether or not these things ever existed. Because if the internet couldn't even get a hold of it, then where has it gone? You see, the internet was beginning to blossom and pose a threat to traditional TV cable providers. Fear of being devoured by irrelevancy, cable providers began their interactive TV campaigns, where more dynamic services would involve the viewer in front of the television. No more was it just turning on the TV and flipping through channels. Now they were promised more control and input. Subscribers can now pay their monthly cable bills through their TV, access missed episodes of their favorite shows through video on demand, look up the weather, see show schedules, and even play games. However, this was not the first instance of interactive TV. A form of it took place in the 1950s with the Winky, Dink, and You show, a kids' TV program featuring cartoon characters. The highlight of the show and main gimmick were the magic drawing screen segments, where the host of the show would ask the child viewer to take out their plastic sheet and place it against the TV screen.
Now she's going to put her magic window right up on the screen of the television set. That's right. You do it just the way she does, boy.
From there, the host would ask the child to draw various things or solve problems with their drawings as a sort of game.
Right up to the magic window because I want you to do some drawing. Get comfortable, come on up to the magic window, and draw a red flower in Cousin Slim's buttonhole. Right on his jacket.
This was a way to include the viewer and take a more active role in the viewing experience. The illusion was that the children were helping out the cartoon characters in whatever the task was through their plastic sheet and drawings, which could easily be veiled if the child did not possess the plastic sheet and proprietary crayons. The host didn't actually react to the drawings or know what they looked like. It was, after all, a pre-recorded video broadcast through early television. You can think of it as the 1950s Dora the Explorer, where she breaks the fourth wall and asks you to help her on her adventures, and demanding Swiper to fuck off. But even before the 2000s though, the idea of interactive TV was somewhat conceptualized, and if the 2000s version of interactive TV was considered in its infancy, then in the 1950s was when it was conceived. Now, as a way to rake in viewers, you could say this was a pretty unique way to cater to more child eyes. After all, what better way to retain someone's attention than through a game that asks for all your attention? And that's what I'll be focusing on. Sure, in today's day and age, you can play games on your TV, but in the beginning, it got strange. Well, I guess more weird than strange. In December of 1994, Sega released the Sega Channel. It was a way to play Sega games on a rotation. Games would be swapped out month by month while paying a $15 a month fee with a one-time $25 activation fee. It was a service you could add on to your cable bill, albeit if your cable provider carried the service. The way you would access the channel would be to slot in the add-on adapter to your Sega console, connect the coaxial cable, power it with a dedicated power plug, and then wait for the service to connect and you were in. You could compare it to the Xbox Game Pass of today, where you have access to a library of games where eventually new games would be available to play, so you would never be out of new games. A bonus was that you could test drive or demo unreleased Sega games not available to the public through this service. However, I have heard that you couldn't save your progress, specifically from GameSax's video he did on the Sega Channel and peripheral. Yet someone in the comments mentions they remember a saving system. But as the service was discontinued, that info has been lost media and we'll never really know if you could. At least, I don't. The footage I have on screen is of a ROM of what it was like back then. I could see this service being a viable way to play Sega games if you were a Sega console owner, seeing as physical games were priced at around $50 to $60. With inflation today, that's about $120. That doesn't sound right, but I mean, it's here on the calculator. You might think to yourself, why would I limit myself to just Sega games? I'd rather just pay for the games I want to play and keep forever. Which is completely valid, and to that we would both agree on. Unfortunately, I was never able to experience the Sega Channel, which honestly probably would have been way better than my first ever interactive TV experience. But I still think it was fun. It's just a blip on the timeline of my gaming history that I barely remember it. It also doesn't help that we didn't even stay with the Dish Network for that long. However, when we had the Dish Network, I stumbled upon PlayinTV. You can tell right off the bat that PlayinTV was a severe downgrade when compared to the Sega channel. For one, these games all had to be played on a standard TV remote at the time. Button input latency was atrocious, especially when there were games when you needed to avoid enemies by timing their pathfinding. Regardless, I loved PlayinTV when I first saw it. I was like a kid in a candy store. So many games to play, it was overwhelming. I was like 6 or 8 years old. I didn't know any better. Know that there were better games out there that didn't suck ass. In retrospect, a lot of these games were just themed reskins and a poor excuse for shovelware. They were flash games restricted and limited to a TV remote for the controller. There's only so much you could do. On top of that, I didn't have the subscription service, so that meant all the games were on a timer, so I couldn't play indefinitely. Not that you would want to, because PlayinTV was meant for the casual of casual gamers, meant for grandparents with declining motor skills. Ironically, even at the time, people did not see PlayinTV as worth it, as seen in these forums discussing it. PlayinTV was something you could do to maybe pass the time for a TV show you didn't want to watch when there was nothing good on. But I was on there for hours playing all the games, and each week new games would be added, which further adds to the type of quality these games were held at, which was not that high, quantity over quality. What's interesting is that I assumed these games would be playable when I found out they were running on Flash. But doing multiple Google searches, and there's only some sparse Reddit threads and early forums that mention PlayinTV. There's barely any information about it or even its games. Luckily, there is a catalog of all the games that were featured on PlayinTV, and there are hundreds. I specifically remember this one game. It was a board game you could play with a friend or computer. It was religion-themed, God on one side and the devil on the other. The goal of the game was to get more people into your fishbowl than your opponent. I remember having so much fun with this game, mostly because I loved setting up these big plays where one after the other I stacked multiples of people into my fishbowl. And while I was digging around on Reddit, someone else had the same question as me. What was the name of that God-Devil game? Come to find out, it was just a themed version of Mancala. And typing in the Judgment game brings up nothing to what I remember, and I would know if I saw it in the Google results. So, unfortunately, I have no way to show you what it looked like. But PlayinTV got me thinking, though. How good it was to not know what was a good or bad game. The child naivety where you could have fun with just about anything. No critical thinking skills yet to hinder your childlike wonder about discovering, of all things, games on your TV. Simpler times for a simpler mind. And apparently Dish wasn't the only one to introduce this type of gaming service to their repertoire of interactive apps. DirecTV back in 2007 implemented their own gaming service named the Game Lounge, which is basically the same idea as Dish's PlayinTV. There was a subscription fee with multiple options offering different types of access. I think the game selection on the Game Lounge though was better, seeing as they had Uno. And as a notable mention from the land down under, Australia also had their own gaming service called A Star Game World on their pay TV company, A Star of the same name. Come to think about it, games through your cable service alone as an idea doesn't pop all that much. I think what helps out these lost media services of the past being remembered so fondly has to be because of the aesthetic they came with. That early 2000s theming of in-your-face, wacky colors, bubbly boxes, and sound effects, as if the developers themselves couldn't hold back from using the most weird collage of colors and textures to draw your attention. No restraint, the most eyesore a thing could be, but it was great. As mundane and tedious it was to navigate these early menus, at least you had something to look at. Not like today with how corporate and soulless everything has become. Creativity has been neutered in this aspect, and now all we have are dark and gray backgrounds with splashes of white, everything turning to a boring mush of text in a void. Just boring.
Being able to watch TV on the computer is great. It just gives you so many more options. You can switch between TV and the internet and the recorder just by pushing a button.
The big screen in the main bedroom is awesome, like being in the cinema. If I had it, I don't think I'd ever get out of bed. You can imagine the whole family spending Saturday morning in front of it.
Got everything really. Your bed that moves.
It was nice to grow up during times of experimentation at least, where companies took risks, even if it was just to stay relevant and, set themselves apart from the competition. But those days are over, and it's sad that I can't play these games anymore. They were never archived or saved to the internet. They lived and died by the services that carried them. Well, at least one wasn't. Carrot Mania was the game on PlayinTV. It had multiple sequels or themes if you want to go that route. A basic bare-bones platformer. Walk-former? There really wasn't any platforming per se. There wasn't even a jump button. You more or less had to figure out the timing of the enemies to allow you to pass by them. A lot more finessing than actual platforming. Well, I guess there were platforms, but the goal in every stage was to collect all the carrots, avoid enemies, rinse and repeat. They were all the same in every iteration, and if you want to play one of them, you can actually play the pirate theme of Carrot Mania on itch.io. So some part of the PlayinTV catalog was preserved, but honestly, I wish Johnny Megatone was somehow archived. Johnny Megatone was a lot like Carrot Mania, but you got a gun, and can jump, apparently. I honestly don't remember that. But Johnny Megatone was my jam. I thought it was so cool because gun! And there was a sense of exploration, walking to one end of the screen and thinking what could possibly be on the other side. Of course, the Indiana Jones theme lends to this kind of thinking. This was the most action-packed game PlayinTV could muster with the basic controls. There was also an American Dragon Jake Long game too, where you could turn into his dragon form and wreak havoc on enemies. That one was also burned into my memory. With all that being said though, where did it all go? I'm partly speaking about the games, but also the time I spent playing those games. It all went by so quickly. It doesn't matter, really. The world keeps turning with or without the preservation of irrelevant media like this. I guess it's easy to look back to a much different world than to live in the one we currently reside in. A kind of coping mechanism to distract us from the horrors that plague the world today. Yet they were always there from the beginning and we just didn't know it. How could we? We were just kids. It was the adults around us that knew what was really going on, which only makes the past that much precious. Because of our lack of awareness that wasn't our fault to begin with, was what allowed for us to enjoy shitty games on the TV. Who knew I would end up missing the old TV guides of early Comcast and Dish and DirecTV, scrolling through page of shows, attempting to find anything new to watch. That's what our problems boiled down to back then. Perhaps I'm just being this nostalgic lately for the fact that during the year of 2024, so much more is being realized in the world. Almost like a blindfold has been taken off, and what I see is darkness. I'm in a tunnel. I have been walking in this tunnel for 22 years, and I've been told I would see a light at the end of this tunnel. Around my mid-20s to early 30s, I would begin to see this faint shimmer of light. All I have to do is keep at it. Keep walking, I would get to this light, and then I would finally be able to relax in its rays. I don't see it. But I'm doing everything I was told to do, so why don't I see it? For all I know, this tunnel could be endless, and the thought of that is enough to drive me crazy. Knowing that all of this could be pointless. I don't know how much longer I could go. I'm tired. I could instead dig through the ceiling or wall for a faster way out, maybe. But then there's the risk of everything collapsing around me. Then really all of my work would have been for nothing. And I don't think I could live with myself if that was my fate in the end, even after death. So it's during these times when I think back to when I didn't know I was in a tunnel, when I was just watching TV.